Hello everyone, and welcome to another wonderful episode of our show, Background Interview. My name is Andrew, filling in for Lily today because, well, let's just say she had a bit too much fun at a party last night and woke up feeling under the weather. But the show must go on, right? Here on Background Interview, we bring you entertaining and enlightening conversations with incredible figures from history and beyond. Our hope is that you can listen while driving, doing chores, or simply relaxing at home, and still feel connected to a world of knowledge and personal growth. Thank you all for that warm reception. I have to tell you, folks, my morning started with a slight predicament. I tried making myself a fancy breakfast to conquer my own minor headache, but let's just say I shouldn't attempt any cooking before my second cup of coffee. I practically set off the smoke alarm. But enough about my culinary disasters. Tonight, we have a very special guest, someone whose literary works have been cherished by generations. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the creator behind the iconic Anne of Green Gables, the one and only L.M. Montgomery.
Hello, everyone. It's truly a pleasure to be here. I'm delighted to meet you all and very honored to have the chance to talk about my life, my upbringing, and of course, Anne.
Please, take a seat right here. I'm so excited to dig into your background and learn more about how you came to create one of the most beloved characters in literature.
Thank you, Andrew. You have no idea how thrilled I am to share my story. There's so much to discuss, from my childhood on Prince Edward Island, to the experiences that shaped my life and ultimately inspired me to write Anne of Green Gables.
Alright, let's settle in. The audience is buzzing with anticipation. So, Ms. Lucy Maud Montgomery, or should I call you Maud? Either way, we're absolutely curious. Tell us a bit about yourself, how you grew up, your family, all the early influences that eventually led to your remarkable literary career.
By all means, call me Maud. I was born on November 30, 1874, in Clifton, Prince Edward Island, Canada. My mother sadly passed away when I was very young, less than 2 years old. After that, my father left me in the care of my maternal grandparents in Cavendish. This was a deeply influential part of my life. My grandparents were strict Scots Presbyterians, and I grew up in a house that was permeated with discipline, piety, and certain old-fashioned values. Yet, living on that small farm near the ocean gave me a lasting sense of wonder at nature's beauty.
That must have shaped your creative spirit in so many ways. The environment in which we're raised can profoundly influence our imagination. Did you find yourself daydreaming frequently as a child? Any particular memories that stand out, especially with nature being such a strong backdrop?
Absolutely. I would daydream for hours, weaving little stories in my mind whenever I explored the woods or gazed upon the rolling hills. That reverence for nature never left me. I believe it's why my writing is so richly descriptive of landscapes and seasons. There's something magical about Prince Edward Island, the vibrant color of the leaves in autumn, the red dirt lanes, the gentle breeze over the fields of grass. It's a land that speaks to you in a quiet but persistent voice, urging you to imagine, to create, to dream.
That certainly resonates with the atmosphere you set in Anne of Green Gables. It's so evocative. Would you say the discipline of your grandparents contrasted starkly with that imaginative world you retreated to?
Yes, indeed. My grandparents were kind but firm. They believed in hard work and had little patience for idle musings. Often, I felt quite lonely. But this solitude pushed me to create imaginary friends and scenarios. I kept journals from a young age, writing not just about my everyday life, but also conjuring elaborate tales that sprung from my loneliness. I guess you could say I cultivated a very vivid interior world, which later transitioned naturally into writing novels.
And it clearly blossomed into something special. Now, speaking of blossoming, let's talk about your literary journey. I know that you attended Prince of Wales College in Charlottetown, then Dalhousie University in Halifax for a bit. Tell us about your path to becoming a published author. Was it smooth sailing, or did you have some obstacles along the way?
Oh, there were plenty of obstacles. When you grow up in a rather conservative and rural community, the idea of writing professionally, especially as a woman in the late 19th and early 20th century, was often met with skepticism. After college, I briefly worked as a teacher. Teaching was a common path for women of my time, but my heart belonged to writing. I wrote for local newspapers and magazines whenever I could. Rejection letters piled up, and it took quite some time before Anne of Green Gables found a publisher. It was rejected several times, in fact.
That must have been discouraging. But you persevered, which truly inspires me. And eventually, in 1908, Anne of Green Gables was released to the world. Now, I can't wait any longer to dive into that novel. It's the reason we're here, after all, to shine a spotlight on this classic. Are you ready to give us a grand tour of Anne Shirley's story?
I'd be delighted. Anne of Green Gables centers around an orphan girl named Anne Shirley, who is mistakenly sent to live with an elderly brother and sister, Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert. They live at Green Gables, a charming farm in Avonlea on Prince Edward Island. Matthew and Marilla had originally asked for a boy to help on the farm, so Anne's arrival is an unexpected twist. But from the moment she arrives, you see her imagination and vibrancy brim over, transforming not only her own life, but also the lives of everyone around her.
I love how Anne is such a spirited girl, talkative, fiercely imaginative, sometimes prone to accidents or misunderstandings, but always so earnest. Walk us through her major arcs in the story. What makes her so special to you, and to the countless readers who have been captivated by her adventures?
Anne's core trait is her boundless imagination paired with a heartfelt longing for acceptance. Having been an orphan passed from household to household, she dreams of a family that loves her unconditionally. Once she settles in at Green Gables, she forms a deep bond with Matthew, who's shy and gentle, and Marilla, who's stern but has a tender heart beneath that exterior. Anne's day-to-day life is marked by comedic mishaps, like accidentally dyeing her hair green, or serving raspberry cordial to a friend who mistakes it for something else. She's romantic to a fault and sees beauty everywhere, naming the roads and ponds with flamboyant titles. Her clashes with classmate Gilbert Blythe, who teases her about her red hair and calls her carrots, are legendary. It's these very human elements, friendship, rivalry, a longing for dignity, that make her universal. She's a dreamer who believes in the power of hope, and that resonates with people from all walks of life.
She sounds like the perfect role model for creative young minds, and even for adults who might have forgotten the enchantment of everyday life. Why did you write Anne's character the way you did? Was there a specific inspiration for Anne Shirley?
Anne is partly inspired by my own childhood imaginings. I always believed in turning the mundane into something extraordinary if only you apply a bit of fancy. But there was also a real-life anecdote in the newspapers, about a couple who asked for an orphan boy but got a girl by mistake. That sparked something in me. I layered aspects of my personality into Anne, along with traits from a few vivacious, imaginative girls I met throughout my teaching years. So, Anne is a tapestry of experiences, daydreams, and real-life stories, woven into one fiery, red-headed protagonist.
That's incredibly fascinating. The way you described Prince Edward Island and the modest life there is so vivid in the novel. It's almost like the setting is a character itself. Did you intentionally set out to capture the essence of your home province?
Yes, wholeheartedly. I love Prince Edward Island with a devotion that words can scarcely convey. It's a small place, simple, peaceful, and yet brimming with natural splendor. I wanted readers worldwide to taste that salt-tinged ocean breeze, to stroll under those lush canopies of trees, and to witness sunsets that paint the sky in gold and crimson. Place matters in Anne of Green Gables because Anne soaks up her surroundings with childlike awe, making the environment come alive on the page.
Let's talk about themes. Anne of Green Gables deals with identity, belonging, the power of imagination, and the transition from childhood to adulthood. In your mind, what's the strongest theme that readers can glean from this story?
Hope is the strongest. The idea that no matter how bleak or lonely your life may start, there's always the possibility of building a family, biological or otherwise, and forging your own happiness through imagination, kindness, and perseverance. Anne teaches us that mistakes and regrets can be stepping stones to growth rather than dead ends. She never stops hoping for a brighter day, and that's a message that continues to endure.
I must say, that's absolutely beautiful. Now, considering its publication in 1908, what was the social reaction at the time? It became extremely popular, didn't it?
Indeed, it was surprisingly successful. Critics praised the novel's warmth and humor, and readers quickly fell in love with Anne's spirit. Before I knew it, I was receiving letters from readers around the world. Many were young women who related to Anne's aspirations. Others were older folks reminded of a simpler past. Publishers in different countries came calling, and the novel got translated into multiple languages. It was beyond what I ever imagined when I first typed away in my little room in Cavendish.
And the impact on Canadian literature was monumental. Many see your work as a landmark in Canada's literary heritage. How did that feel for you?
It was a tremendous honor. I felt that the stories I'd spun in my remote corner of the world had struck a universal chord. But there's also a responsibility that comes with it. People wanted more of Anne, more of Avonlea, more glimpses of that same magic. I wrote several sequels, capturing Anne's journey into adulthood, marriage, and beyond. Yet, no matter how many times I revisited her story, the spark of that first novel always held a singular place in my heart.
And we're so glad you kept the story going. Now, we have so much more to talk about, your personal life, challenges, and achievements beyond Anne of Green Gables. Let's pivot for a moment to your own life story. You got married later in life to Ewan MacDonald, a Presbyterian minister, and you faced some hardships, including struggles with mental health. Would you care to share how these life experiences shaped your writing?
Marriage and motherhood brought new perspectives into my life, but also fresh burdens. Ewan and I moved around quite a bit due to his church postings, and there were times when I felt isolated. Depression was something I grappled with, especially when faced with societal expectations and personal tragedies. But writing remained my solace, a lifeline. Even during my hardest days, creating stories gave me a sense of purpose. I often say my books carried me through the darkness, just as they brought joy and comfort to others.
That's profoundly touching. Your resilience in adversity is inspiring. Now, if you don't mind me asking, were there times you considered giving up writing entirely?
It crossed my mind during the bleakest moments, when the weight of personal obligations seemed too great. But every time I teetered on the edge of quitting, I'd recall the letters from readers. I'd remember that small voice inside my heart urging me to keep creating. Anne's optimism, ironically enough, also became my refuge. How could I abandon something that had become an integral part of who I was?
I'm so glad you persevered. Your story and your books continue to uplift so many. And that, folks, is why we're here today, to celebrate an extraordinary woman, her vibrant imagination, and the timeless wonder that is Anne of Green Gables. Now, it's time to switch gears a bit. We've got some audience questions that came in via email, and I'd love to read a few of them to you, Maud. Ready for our special Q&A segment, everyone? First up, we have a question from Margaret in New York City. She writes, "Dear Ms. Montgomery, did you ever imagine that your book would become such a phenomenon worldwide, and what do you think of modern adaptations like movies or TV series?" Margaret, thank you for your question.
Thank you, Margaret. When I wrote Anne of Green Gables, I had no notion it would stretch across continents and generations. I wrote it primarily out of love, for the joy of bringing Anne's spirited persona into the world. Seeing modern adaptations has been astounding. Each version brings its own flair, and while some take liberties with the plot or characters, I still find it delightful that new audiences continue to discover and cherish Anne's story.
Great answer, Maud. Let's see, next question is from Brian in Seattle. He asks, what advice would you give to a young, aspiring writer who battles with self-doubt and constant rejection? Another excellent question.
Thank you, Brian. My advice: never let rejection stifle your passion. Write because you must, because it enriches your life. Each letter of rejection is a stepping stone, a lesson. Hone your craft, learn from feedback, and persist. If you carry a spark of creativity, keep that flame alive. Trust your instincts, be open to improvement, and never stop believing in the worth of your stories.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Alright, one more from the mailbag. This one is from Clarissa in London. She says, Maud, how do you think Anne Shirley would fare in today's world, with social media and the fast-paced modern lifestyle? Intriguing question, indeed.
Oh, Clarissa, that's a wonderful question. I believe Anne's irrepressible spirit and optimism would translate quite well. She might be a prolific blogger, weaving imaginative descriptions of everyday sights. However, she might struggle with the cynicism and negativity sometimes found online. Anne would remind us to maintain our sense of wonder and kindness, even in the digital age. In other words, she'd be a breath of fresh air, urging everyone to view life through a more hopeful lens.
Thank you for those thoughtful answers, Maud. Now, audience, let's open the floor. Who's got a question for our esteemed guest? Don't be shy. Yes, I see a hand right over there in the front row. Let me come down to you. Watch your step, Andrew. Wouldn't want to trip and create a headline, right folks? Alright, I'm here. Hi there, what's your name and what's your question? Hello, Catherine, nice to meet you. And your question is, yes, oh, I see, that's fascinating. Thank you, let me relay that. Maud, our curious friend here is named Catherine, and she wants to know if you ever thought about writing a sequel that focuses purely on Anne's adult life and her relationships, leaving behind the youthful innocence for a more mature storyline?
Thank you for the question, Catherine. In some of the sequels, like Anne's House of Dreams and others, I did delve into Anne's adult life and marriage. Of course, those stories still retain a touch of the whimsy people associate with Anne, but they also address more mature themes like loss, motherhood, and compromise in relationships. So if you're interested in Anne's grown-up journey, I wholeheartedly recommend exploring those sequels, as they paint a richer, more complex picture of her life beyond Green Gables.
Thank you, Maud, and thank you, Catherine. Anyone else burning with curiosity? Yes, you there, let me head over. I'm getting my steps in tonight, that's for sure. Alright, I'm here. What's your name? Jonathan. Hi mate. And your question would be? Got it. Interesting. Okay, let me bring that question back to our guest. Maud, this is Jonathan asking if any real-life friendships shaped the bond between Anne and Diana Barry in the book.
A delightful question, Jonathan. I often drew upon the deep friendships I had as a young girl, as well as the friendships I witnessed among my peers. Diana represents that one friend in your life who mirrors your spirit yet complements your weaknesses. I wanted to showcase how profound and nurturing female friendships could be. In a world where society often pinned women against each other, I wanted a portrayal that emphasized loyalty, mutual growth, and sincere affection.
Thank you so much, Maud, and to you, Jonathan, for that question. Alright, we have time for one final question. Let's see, yes, the person way in the back, wearing the bright green sweater. Thank goodness I wore comfortable shoes. Great, I've arrived. What's your name, and what's on your mind? Alright, oh, that's an interesting angle. Hang on, let me turn back to Maud. Maud, this is Robert, and he wonders if you've ever considered writing a crossover story where Anne's imagination meets another fictional universe. It sounds quite modern, but he's curious how that might look.
Robert, what a creative mind you have. In my day, crossovers weren't really a norm in literature. We mostly stayed true to the world we built. However, I can imagine Anne meeting a character from, say, a Victorian detective novel or a fantasy realm. She'd likely view them with her trademark curiosity and might even try to rename them in some poetic fashion. Although I never wrote such a thing, it's fun to imagine. Perhaps the modern era of fan fiction is the ideal place to experiment with that kind of storytelling.
Thank you, Maud, and thank you to all our wonderful audience members for these delightful questions. Give yourselves a round of applause.
I'm truly grateful for everyone's enthusiasm. I'm glad to see that Anne's spirit still touches so many hearts.
So am I. Now, Maud, before we wrap up, I have a few personal questions of my own that I'd love to ask you. The first is, who were the people or works that influenced you the most, and how did they shape your approach to storytelling?
Great question, Andrew. I found inspiration in the works of poets like Tennyson and Robert Browning. Their language and sense of romance fired my imagination. I also admired the narrative depth of authors like Jane Austen and Charlotte Bronte. Reading widely helped me discover my voice. And beyond literature, my grandfather's storytelling about family history and local lore played a big role. He told stories around the fireplace that captured the rhythms of community life. This significantly influenced my descriptive style and sense of place.
That's fantastic. Another question, do you have any routines or habits that you hold dear, which fuel your creativity or keep you grounded?
I've always kept a detailed journal. Each morning, I jot down small observations, a description of the sunrise, a snippet of conversation, a particular emotion. That daily ritual keeps my creative muscles limber. And, if possible, I like to take a solitary walk. There's something about fresh air, even in the winter chill, that clears the cobwebs of the mind.
I love that. Solitary walks can be so therapeutic. Next question. What surprises you the most about the modern age, now that you've had a chance to catch a glimpse of how people live and communicate today?
The speed of everything. It's remarkable how swiftly information travels. People are so interconnected through technology. In my time, news traveled slowly, and we had to wait patiently for letters. Now, messages cross oceans in the blink of an eye. It's exhilarating, but also a bit overwhelming. I imagine there's a need to slow down, to reflect, or we risk losing ourselves in the flurry.
Well said. Finally, what message would you like to share with people today, especially those who might be struggling to find hope or meaning in a rapidly changing world?
My message is this: never underestimate the power of your own imagination and your own heart. If you're feeling lonely or defeated, remember that, like Anne Shirley, you can reshape your reality by daring to dream, by nurturing a childlike sense of wonder, and by persevering through trials. Seek out kindred spirits, friends who uplift you, and always remain open to the possibility that tomorrow can be better than today.
Thank you, Maud. That's such an uplifting note to end our main discussion on. Now, let's recap. We've learned about your upbringing with strict grandparents, how you found solace in storytelling, your journey to publishing, Anne of Green Gables, the themes of hope and imagination that have since resonated worldwide, your personal challenges, and your ongoing legacy. You are truly an inspiration, and we can't thank you enough for joining us tonight.
It has been an absolute pleasure, Andrew. Thank you, and thank you to this wonderful audience for making me feel so welcome.
We'll let you head off for the evening. Thank you so much again for your time and for sharing your life's experiences with us. Ladies and gentlemen, L.M. Montgomery. Alright, folks, that was the legendary author of Anne of Green Gables. And thank you all for joining us on this enlightening journey. This is Background Interview, where we bring you the perfect blend of education and entertainment. Great for listening on your commute or while you're tidying up at home. Before we wrap up, let me remind you to subscribe to our channel or podcast feed. Give us a like, leave a comment, and tell your friends. Also, if you missed a part of this talk because you were, say, focusing on a tricky recipe in the kitchen, trust me, I've been there, feel free to replay this episode. And don't forget, we've got the Background Interview podcast playlist if you like binge listening to fascinating discussions. I do it myself sometimes. Put it on while I'm folding laundry, and I end up so engrossed I fold everything into question marks. Jokes aside, it's time for us to sign off. Thank you all so much for joining us. I'm Andrew, wishing Lily a speedy recovery, and we'll see you next time for another exciting episode of Background Interview.